maybe we get started and people can join when they join and get caught up. Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I know it's late for some of you, but this is an info session for the Cybernetic Countercultures Intensive. I'm Hannah. I am the research manager at Gray Area. I assume most people know what Gray Area is since you've found your way to this Zoom meeting, but if you don't, Gray Area is a San Francisco-based hub for interdisciplinary collaboration that integrates art, science, technology, and the humanities. We host exhibitions and audiovisual performances in our theater here in the Mission District. We have an incubator program for artists and technologists, and we also have an education program, which the Cybernetic Countercultures Intensive is a part. And the Cybernetic Countercultures Intensive sort of grew out of a collaboration between Bruno and David of Guidance Systems and Gray Area. The project we worked on together in the past was called The End of You, a very auspicious title for a program that launched right before the pandemic. And The End of You was a creative research and development lab and culminating exhibition, and it invited artists to propose novel experiences to cultivate planetary thinking. And so the Cybernetic Countercultures Intensive grows out of that exploration and also responds to the proliferation of so-called artificial intelligence and the need to disentangle exactly what we mean when we say intelligence. So I'll turn it over now to Bruno and David. I forgot to advance to the slide that has myself on it, but yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
seem, hey,
it.
and I've lost my buttons, it
Let's
seems.
let's see if I can get
Well,
them.
there's something there. Let me try
Uh,
going back. No.
you should
Oop.
be able to advance. Try again.
Yeah, I don't see the buttons either, Hannah.
No, the buttons went
Okay.
away.
Let me stop sharing and I'll reshare.
Okay.
Um,
We had it all set up, and then we lost our buttons.
try now.
Mm,
No.
no.
Um, okay, let's.
Okay, well, yeah.
Not a big
We-
deal.
Okay.
no big deal. We'll just tell you, go next slide, please. But let's see if we can get our buttons back.
No?
No, I'm getting this little tally.
All right. Well, I'll
Uh,
just let me know and I'll.
okay, I'll let you know. This is Hannah's bio, and that's a picture of the Grant Theater. Is that the in the Union District, which is the headquarters of Gray Area? So that's where Hannah works, and Hannah's essentially going to be my TA, as it were, for the course. So she'll be running the thing on the Gray Area servers there, and and so we'll just see how that goes. Next slide, please. So this is me. This is my academic credentials here. I've been retired from 1 year, so I'm a retired and recuperating academic. And but as an academic, I invested my energy in writing books, as one does, to work through the academic ranks. So these are the last four of my single authored, well, actually three single authored books, an essay collection, with Mark Hansen called Emergence and Embodiment. But these are all the books that I published after getting into essentially second order cybernetics and the work of Heinz von Förster, Matron and Varela, Niklas Luhmann, and then the next slide just informs you of, this is my most recent book, co-edited with Sebastian Dutroy, a French scholar who wrote an 800-page James Lovelock dissertation with Bruno Latour as an outside reader. So Seb and I collaborated to pull together the scientific correspondence of Gaia's original inventors and promoters. And I'm going to bring our discussion to Gaia in good time as we move along the course of organic cybernetics. So I think this is one of the if the most sort of august of the forms that organic cybernetics takes. Okay, so that came out in 2022. David?
Hi, thanks, Bruno. Greetings, everybody. Yeah, I'm here kind of as a, I don't know, mediator, interlocutor of interlocutors. Bruno and I met back in 2013, giving talks at NYU, and really hit it off around some common interests, particularly kind of systems, countercultures. And at the time, he was giving a really remarkable talk on whatever happened to AI. And this was at a time before like the resurgence of the marketing machine behind this idea. And he was talking about the ways in which what we consider artificial intelligence is actually an emergent phenomena of the lithosphere and the biosphere and the atmosphere. It was the first time I'd heard anybody talking about it in the context of kind of planetary cognition. So we became fast friends and ended up cranking up the Gaian Systems project over a number of years. And through that project, I've done a number of labs and kind of residency kind of things and explorations. You can see that at the Gaian.systems site. But this was really something, this course is really something that's like a long time coming with regards to kind of really spelunking these histories and understanding their significance for the present. And I think a lot of this has become increasingly urgent as we've seen sort of the AI hype reach sort of unprecedented levels. And it's got really serious implications for how we think about cognition. We think about the histories and contexts that oftentimes are completely ignored with regards to particular theories and understandings of mind and consciousness and cognition. And so I really am excited about the lineup that we've got for the course. And we've been able to loop in some pretty remarkable characters to join us to investigate these histories and their relevance for the present. A little bit about myself. I've run a studio, co-founded a studio called Spherical. My academic background was studying with the Planetary Collegium and Roy Ascott, who had a deep history with cybernetic arts. And so a lot of my own interest is in kind of art research and practice, and thinking about the nexus of sort of inactive cognition and artistic practice. And our studio really tries to make stuff to demonstrate a lot of these ideas, whether there's installations or software and a number of other things. So really excited to be here, and thanks to Gray Area for hosting this.
Yeah, and hey, while this slide is up, I'll mention the image next to David's picture there is from a current project, which is massive, working to re-engineer Los Angeles's water infrastructure kind of from the ground up according to ecological design principles. So David's going to be riding shotgun throughout the course. There may be a time or two when he's going to be pulled away by all the other work that he's doing, but it's a really hands-on application of living systems thinking to the hard problems of creating resilience in urban areas for the long haul. Okay. Let's do it. So this is the website that David and I began around the time that I was in residence in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress as the astrobiology chair. I thought I was going to have like mega bucks to bring David in to do an actual immersive installation at the Library of Congress. My budget really didn't stretch that far, so we started a website instead, and it's and there's lots of content on it, but it's all I think of it. It's your one and only stop for all the best information about Gaia theory, and related discourses. So that's that. So let's get it on with the course. Okay, so here's the current version of the total itinerary. It might, let's leave it there for a second. It may change a little bit between now and when we start, but I think this is pretty solidly set in place now. And so we're going to go through and open up the first 7 weeks, 7 or 8 weeks about which we're really, sort of certain that this is the way that it's going to unfold, and then I think that'll give you a good enough idea of how we're going to move now. We're going to from bringing forward the idea of organic cybernetics, about which I'll talk a little bit more, and then going back to the foundational discussions in which it was really evident on the face of what people were talking about that living in biological systems were absolutely crucial to the emergence of cybernetics as a discourse. So we're going to go from that initial confrontation of the organism and the technological artifact and the thinking that goes between them in the foundational era with Norbert Wiener. And then we're going to jump right up to the theory of autopoiesis that was brought forward in the early 70s by Mathurin and Varela, and then to Bateson and his steps to an ecology of mind, and then a second section on epistemology and cognition. We'll bring forward Heinz von Förster and his biological computer laboratory. We'll get back to some more of Francisco Varela's work, and then we'll go into, we'll take a couple of weeks to go from early Gaia in the period of the hypothesis on towards the more mature formations of Gaia theory. And that's good for now, but that's the big picture as we now see it. Okay. So here is what I'm calling the Cybernetic Countercultures Network. And so as we go along, these are the personalities that we'll be talking about at lesser or greater length. The foundational generation there, Bucky Fuller, I can't really, I don't get me started on each one of these, but what we'll see is that they're really interesting connections that pull together their relationships between, for instance, Bateson and Varela that are not commonly known. between Lovelock and Margulis and Stuart Brand and other folks whose picture you see here. So that's part of the texture of the history of the relationships among the thinkers, and all of whom I would say really had an organic cybernetic orientation that drove the way their thinking developed. Yeah, okay, so let's just keep diving in. The problem of intelligence, or we'll get, David kind of mentioned that, so we want to position AI because what we think of this is it's a counter discourse to AI hype, essentially, or just the sense that AI is the sum total of what cybernetics is about or what cybernetics has become. So we've got some polemics that we'll rehearse with regard to that. But as far as a social phenomenon goes, the Whole Earth Catalog is this phenomenon that brings systems thinking out of the scientific academy and lays it down for the American counterculture in this amazingly profound and intensive way. What you're seeing, the image is I believe it's the outside back cover of the spring, which, like the second Whole Earth Catalog, is already evoking systems thinking with regard to Earth itself as a whole system. And if we go back to the passage where the editor of the Whole Earth Catalog, Stuart Brand, took the caption for the picture, it's from this book by Harold Morowitz called Energy, Flow, and Biology, where Morowitz makes clear that the motivation for this approach to thinking to sort of energy and life, the motivation is biological and has its origins in an attempt to find a physical rationale. So here's this constant juggling that we'll be seeing between physical explanation, thermodynamics, issues of energy, and then living systems, evolution, and then autopoiesis and how those hang together. Okay, so yeah, what do we got next here? Yeah, so after a couple iterations of the Whole Earth Catalog, Stuart Brand took a bit of a breather, and then he came back in 1974 to, and to me, this is where the main influx of organic cybernetics appeared, was published in this extra scientific venue for the intelligentsia, basically for the green intelligentsia of the American counterculture. And so there was a moment in which these periodicals, going from the catalog to the Coevolution Quarterly, where an amazing amount of green cybernetics was being put before an informed readership. And so we're going to use those publications as a very kind of tight initial gathering of the kinds of cybernetics that we're going to be talking about. Okay. Just so if you turn to the inside front cover of the first number of Coevolution Quarterly, Stuart Brand kind of explains what the title indicates. What is It wasn't really a well-known term, except in Paul Ehrlich's biology classes that Stuart Brand took when he was studying with the biologist Ehrlich at Stanford in the early 60s. So this was a concept that was just coming out. But what Brand could see was that it was a essentially an elaboration of a systems approach to living to living beings and their interactions with each other and their interactions with their environment. So ecology, he underscores, is whole system. That is the sort of thing that was going on in the Whole Earth Catalog. All right, but coevolution within ecology is whole system in time. The health of it is forward, as opposed to sort of backward-looking environmentalists who say can't we just go back to when everything was pure and pristine, right? Of course, the impetus here is no, let's go forward into this technological world, but at the same time, a world that's beginning to grasp how living systems hang together. Okay, so Unit 1, here are the people once more that we'll go through in our first unit here. We'll go from, now Wiener was there at the very beginning with some, in fact, Wiener was the man who coined the word cybernetics. He published a book in 1948 with the title Cybernetics, or Control and Communication in the Animal and the Machine. So there's your organism and artifact. And so fascinating guy. So that's why he's here as our kickoff person. So let's push it along, because I've got a slide for each of these folks just to open them up just a slight bit more. Yeah. Oh, well, I just found this as I was rummaging around today. This is Francisco Varela, and he's really going to be one of the heroes. He's become one of my heroes, in the intellectual heroes in the milieu of organic cybernetic thinking. And what he's pointing out here, if you glance at the text, and this is from 1986. Check it. What the last piece that I just brought out. The point I'd like to raise: it's high time now to develop the Wienerian side, which he pointed out was the more organic, the side Wiener motivated from biology, totality of independence, autonomy, creativity, the quality of living beings to create their meanings, to create their world. And he's juxtaposing Wiener to John von Neumann, who you may recognize as one of the architects of the modern computer. Okay, so von Neumann was absolutely crucial for the emergence of computation, for the developments in computation altogether. So he's seeing between Wiener and von Neumann, they're not opposed thinkers, but von Neumann really represents what we now think of as the road from cybernetics to the internet, to computation, to AI, to the technosphere of the moment. Whereas there's this other side of cybernetics, which was not about control, but about autonomy. That's what Varela picks up on. Okay, so I think now this was 40 years ago, but it's still a good time to develop the Wienerian side quite a lot more. And he's pointing out that there have been developments in biological cybernetics in the last couple of decades, at the time he's saying this, that warrant this enlargement of interest in that. What is still essentially, if the von Neumann defines the mainstream of cybernetic developments, the Wienerian Varela side is still kind of the counterculture to that development. So hence one of the reasons why we think that term is appropriate and not just window dressing to what we're doing here. Okay. Yeah, so here's Matron and Varela. The cartoon from their book called The Tree of Knowledge. The two guys, Chilean biologists who became international thinkers. The basic diagram of the circularity of the autopoietic concept, and then as that develops, it gets somewhat complexified, indicating it's not an utterly closed system. There's it's structurally coupled to the environment, right? So and there's an interaction there, but you still have an essential closure. All right, we'll be talking about all of that sort of stuff as we go into the topic. And here's Gregory Bateson, amazing polymath, British expat, becomes an American citizen, goes through a number of sort of phases of a really amazing career, and then rather later in life, his works are brought together in Steps to an Ecology of Mind. So that came out in 1972. Stuart Brand picked up on it immediately, and as a result, Bateson essentially became the presiding luminary of the Coevolution Quarterly. And this is the first big splash in Brand's publications, where he lays out the case for the crucial nature of Bateson's thinking. All right, Unit 2. Here are the people we'll be talking about. Heinz von Förster, not a household name perhaps, but he ran a lab at the University of Illinois, the biological computer lab that was an incubator, a supreme incubator for the side of cybernetics that we'll be talking about. Now Varela launches off on his own at this point, and we'll look at some of his earlier work. And then in the midst of all this, Lovelock and Margulis bring out the Gaia hypothesis, which they think of quite explicitly as a cybernetic theory of planetary operation. So let's go and we'll just see a few more images. Von Förster's late publication out of his lab was a kind of compendium of the turn toward what he calls second order cybernetics, or the cybernetics of observing systems. That is the cybernetics of cybernetics, because observation is essentially a synonym for cognition, or at least for a particularly focused mode of cognition. And so now the concept of the observer comes forward very dramatically, but to have an observer, you need a living system. That is, cognition fundamentally emerges from living operation. Okay, and here's Francisco from just a little bit later on in the 70s with one of his amazing early papers. And you can kind of get a glance at the way here that he's kind of providing a template for positioning cybernetics in terms of these other, mythology, cognition, formalism, seeing how broadly the concepts being developed here can illuminate neighboring discourses. Okay, so, and then this is the cover of the summer 75 number of Coevolution Quarterly, which had a 12-page like monster article on the Gaia hypothesis, lead authored by Lynn Margulis, the American biologist, along with her colleague James Lovelock, the British atmospheric chemist. And so this is just an amazing sort of coming together of sort of scientific thought way out on the cutting edge of planetary thinking and the American counterculture as represented by Stuart Brand's Coevolution Quarterly. So if you'll just flip the next one up, this is just the first page. So we're going to go through this article because it's still essentially, by this time, they'd really fashioned the basic tenets of the hypothesis pretty clearly. And so this article really holds up as an introduction to the Gaia concept. So this is just the opening set of pages for an article that continues on at some length. And just quick, something that Seb found in the Science Museum in London, but this is James Lovelock's own diagram of Gaia as a cybernetic system, okay, with the comparison to a basic electronic circuit control system with the feedback loop. So that's kind of cool. So that's how we're going to come at Gaia, by underscoring its inclusion in this overall scheme of organic cybernetics. Yeah, okay. And I'll the final units look like this. Evan Thompson was a wonderful thinker and a colleague of Varela's, co-author with Varela of a famous book called The Embodied Mind, and he'll come in to talk to us about as we go into the development and the further development of Varela's thinking. I'm going to take a week to talk about my book, since since why not? So I'll take a week to take you through my own scholarship on the further development of Gaia theory from the initial hypothesis, and especially Lynn Margulis's specific ideas. Margulis, who then would go on to talk about autopoietic Gaia, okay, bringing that particular line of from Matron and Varela into Gaia discourse. So I think that's something worth taking a good look at. And then the last couple of weeks, we're waiting to hear from a couple of people that we've invited. But these evolutions of the topic are going to bring us right up to the current moment of large computational observational practices, and also into David. I think you might have a stronger sense of, if we get our man for week 11 and abundant intelligences, then we'll be coming back to the idea of intelligence, but not in its artificiality, but in its organic grounding. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, we've invited Jason Edward Lewis, who leads a research lab at Concordia University, and is kind of deeply involved in a lot of the work going on with indigenous AI, an initiative that started a number of years ago. And it sort of emerged as Abundant Intelligence as an international research effort, really examining this notion of intelligence. And the essay that we'll read for that week is called Making Kin with the Machines, which is quite a remarkable piece that was published at MIT a number of years ago, but really excited about the ways in which they are at a very deep cosmological and ontological level, challenging a lot of the assumptions from a different perspective, perhaps related, but different from a lot of the organic cybernetics that emerged that we'll be covering. But really excited to get into that. Jason is tentatively accepted. We're just working out scheduling to make sure he can make it at that time.
Okay, and then we've left the final week open. So we'll have a roundtable with whoever's whoever makes it to the bitter end, and an opportunity to use the forum of our intensive to bring their work or their thinking, whatever shape that may take. We'll open it up to a final roundtable and we'll just see where we're at that point, and what people may have made of it in terms of their thinking, or in some more concrete fashion where they've developed their thinking in terms of a project of some sort. And that's it. And then it's Christmas. And I think this is just to mention, but that due to the good work of Gray Area, which doesn't even take credit for it, all of these Whole Earth publications are now available. They're just right there at wholeearth.info. So if you want to just jump in and look around especially at the Whole Earth Catalog and the Coevolution Quarterly, those are the two that we're going to be dealing with. But in any event, and then as we're going along through the intensive, this is just a really fabulous resource that's only been up for a little while now. But just so that you're aware of it, you can just dive in and pull off any information you want at wholeearth.info. And was there one more slide? Yeah, final bit of information for you.
Yeah, just some administrative notes. As advertised on the website, the course will run from September 30th to December 16th. It'll take place on Monday evenings from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Pacific time. We have two ways of joining our little adventure. You can join as a full participant, which means you have access to the live Zoom, like participate in live discussions with Bruno and David and myself, as well as our guest interlocutors. And then there's an audit access option, which grants you access to the recorded classes. And then both options grant you access to our communication platform, we haven't decided whether we're going to use Discord or Slack, but something like that. Both options will also have access, obviously, to the syllabus and the readings that are included therein. We have scholarships available as well. You can apply for these by September 16th. There are a couple options for scholarships. Full scholarships, as in the full tuition is granted, as well as partial scholarships from 25 to 50% off. And we will notify people who have applied for scholarships of their status 2 to 3 days after September 16th, just to give everyone enough time to apply. There's a QR code for the link that's below it. You can find the link to apply for scholarships there as well. It's an Airtable form. And I think that's all we have. So please let us know what questions you have. Feel free to unmute or drop them in the chat, and we can field them.
All right. Well, thanks for being here, folks. Yeah, questions, thoughts?
Hi, my name is Chris, and had a couple questions. I'm wondering if you could describe what a class session will be like. So what's going to be the structure of a class session?
Right. Thanks, Chris. Well, this is how I see it now, but let me preface it by saying this is, I mean, this is modifiable depending on what people would like that very thing to be. But the way I conceive it is, I'm going to have prepared presentations. It's a 2-hour session once a week. So what I'm going to have prepared is a 45. Well, I don't know, but I figure I'm going to break it into 2 and have and then sort of just kind of, so I hesitate to call it a lecture, but I'll have a prepared presentation. And for instance, one thing I tend to do is, there's some very key articles that I want. And as an old professor, my mode would be, okay, let's open up this article, let's work through it, and let's just make sure we can read this thing and with understanding. So when we're ready to get going, there's going to be a reading list. We don't have that up yet, but basically you'll see, okay, in the coming week, Bruno is going to zero in on, this is an article that he's going to open up and walk people through to some degree. Okay. And then hopefully that will, and then it'll just turn into discussion and Q&A. And I think whether that's a longer, whether I take an hour to go through a really sort of an article that has that much depth that I want to really unfold it at that length, but then the second hour is just is now its discussion period with regard to that specific content, and then the greater conceptual milieu that's coming out of. Okay, so on the reading list, what you'll see is an indication of what the key article will be that will definitely be working through to some extent, and then a couple other suggested readings that I'll be talking about in the context of that, and that you're invited to take a look at either before class or after class. So there's no assigned readings like a standard academic seminar. Yeah, but if you're motivated, you could say, well, let me take a crack at this article because I know we're going to be talking about it. Okay. And or after class say, okay, now I think let me go back and look at that because I've got a basic idea of what's important and what I should be looking for in that piece of writing. So that's about as far as I've got it conceptualized as so I mean, that's why I say I'm a recuperating academic, because I'm trying not to make it over rigorous. Well, rigorous, yes, but not in that mode of academic expectation that you'll come in having done the assigned reading and you're going to get a grade. None of that stuff. I want to keep it open-ended and conversational as much as possible, once I've done my little teaching bit.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm not at all afraid of being graded.
Well, then,
part of the reason.
Well, I tell you what, then I'll, just let me know. And well, hand in a project or present a project at the end. And if you want a grade, I'll give you one.
I mean, part of the rationale behind my question is cybernetics is a pretty vast field. And just looking at some of the names you've already provided, there's, you know, many other names that were not included. I think the work of Stafford Beer would probably be pretty interesting, especially in an ecological context. So I don't know if there's room, if you're building room into the structure of the courses to bring in other, you know, other folks, other debates around cybernetics. I mean, Deleuze and Guattari were also very influenced by this in the early 70s, but of course that then takes things in a very different direction.
Right. Well, listen, man, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, so it's kind of a how broadly do you try to paint it, or how broad or narrow to make it? But if so you're familiar with Stafford Beer, who was absolutely crucial, especially in the Chilean context of Matron and Varela and the debacle around Allende and Pinochet, and then just with regard to the British cyberneticists that you can read about in Pickering's The Cybernetic Brain, right? And so we're kind of on the American end of all that, because we kind of planted our flag in California with the Whole Earth Network, using the Whole Earth Network as a kind of organizational device to give it some shape and delimitation. But I'm absolutely, I'd be thrilled for you or anyone else to either say, but to introduce a character like Stafford Beer into the conversation, or just to say why let's come back to this, or let's just add this in. Maybe next week we can take a little bit of time to plug something in that wasn't already on the syllabus. That I think that'd be fabulous. If folks want to do that.
Yeah, I also just
Thank
want to
you.
add that another, motivation for having this course is to build sort of a community around this history and of discussing it. And I think that there's a lot of room for discussion in various offline platforms that we'll utilize, and that'll be a great place for, hosting more ad hoc sessions outside of class time, or for having a sort of ongoing chat thread, bringing in other thinkers that aren't in the reading list right now.
Yeah, we as Hannah said, we haven't finalized our decision on what technology to use for that sort of side conversation. It just sort of that'll just be there for people to toss their ideas at, and for other folks to take a look at outside of the course proper, but we'll have that utility going.
Yeah. I also want to field a question from the chat about whether the readings will be provided ahead of time in the full stream, and will they be provided in a format for text to voice. Readings will be provided ahead of time, and as to whether they will be in a format for text to voice, I can certainly look into that. Right now we just have sort of a repository of PDFs, but I can email you. Okay, PDF works. Great. Yeah, if anyone has other sort of accessibility questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or email me afterwards. My email is Hannah, as in the palindrome, HANNAH, @grayarea.org. Or just info@grayarea.org if you can't remember that.
Can I ask about the project format you're envisioning? Because when I read that, my sense was, okay, if we're coming to this with our art practice and basically saying, okay, I'm going to use these discussions as a way to create something that I know how to validate to my communities. Uh, that's basically I'll say a little about myself is basically uh, I finished a degree in HCI basically, and that means that part of writing is done. I want to continue engaging with the ideas, but professionally, it doesn't feel like uh yeah, I'm just struggling with whether to jump in and commit this time to a project that is maybe grounded in this experimental kind or emergent kind of rigor, where you're bringing together so many different interdisciplinary ideas. And I'm I understand that this is a strong history, but I'm just trying to understand who it's addressed to, or if we're really bringing that part ourselves.
Yeah, Hannah, I think, why don't you, I mean, as I listen to Jasmine talk, I'm just thinking of what gray area does in its artistic aspect. Uh, um, that I mean, I'd be thrilled if Jasmine came along to and found could instantiate the conceptuality we'll be dealing with in an art work, whatever might be her medium, and whether I'm my sense is that gray area would be able to accommodate that with its tech cred. What
Yeah,
do you think?
sure. I think, yeah, I guess to sort of, I think part of your question is asking, yeah, like for whom is this class designed? And
Yeah.
I guess it's really, I mean, it's quite open-ended. I think it's really designed for people who are curious about looking to history or a specific version of history to better understand our present and provide a set of references, ideas, and people who maybe sort of depart from a more mainstream version of cybernetics and how that informs more mainstream modes of building technology. And I think, yeah, that's a pretty open-ended answer, but I think to your point, like, I think we encourage participants to bring whatever projects and perspectives they're coming with, and that will certainly enrich the conversations that we have.
Yeah.
And as far as like the projects go, again, quite open-ended, as is the nature of cybernetic systems, I guess. But we definitely, yeah, throughout the course, producing a project at the end is by no means a requirement, but it's more of an invitation. And we, from gray area side, we're happy to sort of help, develop any sort of project people are working on, especially if it's like a visual art piece or something that we do a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in San Francisco, we have a space here. You're welcome to work out of it. Otherwise, there are various sort of public exhibition opportunities that could be relevant to projects that, work within that format. Yeah, hopefully, does that sort of answer?
Yeah, it connects it more. When you say alternative, I think of venues like AltViz and AltChi that are kind of emerging from that side of the HCI tradition, of course, which is very much, yeah, I think that would be very legible to those particular communities, and that's much clearer to me. Thank you.
Great, cool.
Terrific.
It might also just be worth mentioning like how we worked with artists during the interview. Because a lot of the connections that we were drawing and things that would emerge through explorations, we worked with 12 artists for over a year, sort of exploring the ideas underlying kind of core Gaian systems concepts, as they're, particularly the dynamics between what was going on with cybernetic art in the 1960s and cybernetics influencing concepts of planetary systems. And the artists were invited to kind of interpret that in their way. We were running an experimental space research lab. And so it was very open-ended in terms of like what ended up being produced, but it was quite vibrant in terms of the dialogues that emerged and the exploration. And since everybody was obviously at different levels of familiarity with the history and things, I think
Right.
this is a bit more tilted towards, historical context. But I do think that I think we'd hope to leave space to kind of see what emerges in the different explorations. And the reason I really enjoy working with Bruno is he's just such a font of knowledge of all the different patterns and connections. And as we get into the materials, bringing forward how it's relevant to the ways in which a lot of these paradigms of, interface design or interaction or,
Sure.
different forms of machine learning, we'll see how that would emerge, but we're trying not to be prescriptive about it ahead of time. It's more of an invitation to see what kind of comes out of it.
Yeah, it's a joint action problem, right? Getting the subgroup of interest to take it if it was going to go in that like the interfaces direction.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully joint action potential, not just a problem.
Cool. Well, we've hit 7, which remarkable that we filled up the time exactly. But if anyone has any lingering questions or thoughts, happy to answer them. Or if not, we're super excited to get started in a couple weeks here. Hope you all sign up. We would love to see you in the class. I see one question about the recording for the class, which or recording of this session will be on the Cybernetic Countercultures Intensive page on Gray Area's website, either probably tomorrow. And I see Chris have a hand raised.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, thank you. Wanted to ask another question, but I wanted to let other people go if they had questions as well. Because this question is sort of a large one, so maybe take it on however you see fit. Cybernetics is an interesting field. Of course, one of the critical use cases for Wiener and von Neumann was the fire control problem for anti-aircraft batteries in World War II. And so there's a very interesting genealogy between cybernetics and political power. And as cybernetics began to have an influence on ecology, it in some ways pulled ecology away from an older natural historical tradition and more towards a very highly capitalized, very technologically intensive form of knowledge production. Now, cybernetics alone didn't do that. Obviously, there were many other influences on the formalization of the natural sciences in the 20th century. But I'm wondering what you all think about that, about, again, kind of broadly the political history or the political ontology of something like cybernetics.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big question. But an excellent question. Well, that's part of why it's the cybernetic countercultures. Wiener famously refused to work with the military at a certain point when he realized the power of cybernetic ideas, unlike John von Neumann, which is exactly what Varela goes on to talk about in that paper that I tossed up an excerpt of. So there's these two faces. Bateson himself was sort of famously hesitant to actually prescribe uses for his thinking, which as I'm learning, boning up on Bateson's history, kind of drove some of his earlier collaborators a little crazy, because they wanted to do straight science and they wanted to get the standard kinds of grants, and Bateson would just elude that sort of thing, and then found this later home in the California counterculture, and then landed up at Esalen in his last couple of years, as well as other kinds of forums for what was essentially still at that point a kind of sort of environmentalist resistance to coming out of the 60s and the anti-war movement. So I think of this particular line of cybernetic thought as the a kind of, well, the word that I've used in the past is a detoxification. If that military incubation of original cybernetic ideas was, well, I mean, it was still World War II at the time. We're still fighting the Nazis. And Bateson was part of that war effort too. But in after years, he was not particularly happy with what he, with what he was up to, working for intelligence agencies. There's this new book on, oh God, what's it? It's called Tripping in Utopia, which is really fascinating. Then there's the whole psychedelic thing. Yeah, if anyone wants to open up the LSD context of, well, obviously Stuart Brand was one of the merry pranksters. So you have this whole psychedelic line of expanded consciousness, but I think, and within that line, that is still a primary contact to the organic. I mean, that's your mind on drugs, man. That's cognition welling up with a little help from chemistry, and so that's a muted context, but you can pull that thread and have a whole lot of stuff to look at. So that's part of the story as well. I just think myself that as when we stay with the sort of the line that there's a special connection that I'm really just myself learning the extent of between late Bateson and early Varela. And to me, and that's really that's the sweet spot, I think, of organic cybernetics as opposed to any other version that it took, and that's a kind of mode that really resists monetization, which was never really the case with AI or cyber culture, generally speaking. Let me leave it at that. Did that do anything for you?
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate your candor in the answer. Okay. I mean, the article that I think I read when I was a lot younger that got me thinking of a lot of these questions, not so much the countercultural influence was
the Gallison article.
Yeah, that's a good one, but also Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, really sure.
A good job of, for that point in time, sort of synthesizing.
Right. But what Donna never really picked up on was second order cybernetics and the autopoietic line. I've had many an argument with Haraway, and actually, me and Haraway and Rosie Braidotti did a meeting for an evening for Lynn Margulis in Rotterdam back in December, and it's on. You can click on my website brunoclark.net. You can get a link to it. And what I think is what was gratifying to me was that Donna's finally come around just a little bit. But yes, no, her thinking was absolutely crucial as a within critical theory. I mean, now you're talking my language back from academe, but the resistance to mainstream cybernetic control, command and control and communication, the 3 C's, right, which looms as a kind of a potentially or actually repressive political dynamic. And so, but this is the cybernetics of like the dialectics of liberation, which was Bateson, this famous meeting that Bateson attended in '67 with Allen Ginsberg and I don't know who else, but I mean, so this is the countercultural lineage, literally speaking, that Donna's work didn't really reference one way or another. I don't think, thinking back to it. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I look forward to furthering the discussion during the course.
Totally.
Well,
Anybody else? We're happy to stay here as long as you want to prod at these matters.
yeah, and you're also, everyone's welcome to send us an email with questions that come to you later.
Very much appreciate yeah, the idea of throwing in those other, I'm just so curious because of the number of directions this can go. It's going to depend on getting to know individuals, is my sense. I think we know a bit more about you, Bruce, through that connection, and I'm wondering what else will emerge. Really appreciate the conversation.
Come on out and find out. We're curious as well to see where it all goes.